Keep your radio dial right here. You're locked into the hottest news station on the planet. Hot 702.5 in FM sound. Blazing today's hip-hop, R&B, and pop music. Keeping your radio on fire. Bringing you the hottest, realest, riskiest talk shows live 24/7 on hot7025fm.com.
What's going on, everybody? It's your main man, 360, the poet from the Morning Wood, and I'm here to talk to you about the Sci-Fi Center. It's your Vegas home for science fiction, horror, and fantasy. From comic books, toys, and posters to movie screenings and live events, they've got you covered. Located at 900 Cameron Avenue, Suite B209, give them a call, 702-900-4335, or reach them at thescificenter.com.
Hey, what's up?
All your favorite artists.
Check it out. Say my name. DJ Khaled.
This is Mila J.
Bruno Mars.
On hot7025fm.com.
Happy Wednesday. How are y'all feeling? I hope y'all are doing great and feeling amazing as I am myself. I'm not going to lie. It's been a very good week. Very, very good week. I'm so happy to so happy to actually be able to make it through the week. Last week was actually the anniversary of my brother's death. I made it 14 years, so we went out and celebrated, me and the family, Buffalo Wild Wings, like old days that me and him would do. But it was a great, it wasn't no sad moment. It was like a uplifted moment. We was all just happy to be able to be there with each other. It was pretty nice. So I'm happy about that. I'm very happy about that. Also, can't forget, drum roll, my son has made the football team at school. So he is at practice currently at the moment, so that's pretty cool. He's got practice a couple days out the week for football. He has games. I believe the first game starts in September. So I'm looking forward to that. But, I'm proud of him. It was a great thing. We went out and celebrated yesterday, went to eat. My kids are just very simple. He actually just wanted to go to Burger King with the play place and play in a little thing with his siblings, and that was kind of interesting because I told him, where you want to go to celebrate? And he said, so I'm happy to see it. But we had a little celebration. We'll probably do something else this weekend when everybody's free, just to be able to show them the support. I'm so proud of them. I didn't really do sports growing up, but to see how passionate my son is about him and to be there to help him through it, help him get to it. It's just dope. It's just dope. So it's a great feeling as a father to know my boy's on the football team now. It's somewhere to start. Hopefully the next couple of years, get him ready on whatever sport he will choose to do, because right after football, there's soccer. Right after soccer, there's basketball again. So we'll see. I just want to keep him active and make sure he's got a nice pass. But I also like to make sure he understands, his schoolwork comes first. Because if you don't have good grades, they're not going to let you play. You know what I mean? So always have a plan B. But that was very exciting to hear that the news came in. He called me right away. He said, "Daddy, guess what? I already knew, but I couldn't say. I'm like, oh, what's up? What's going on? That's when he told me he made the football team. Let him know I'm so proud of him. Other than that, it's not really too much that happened last week. Nothing too bad. I apologize for the way the show ended last week. Something happened here at the house with maintenance, but everything's cleared up. Don't worry. Nobody will be doing that no more. We have had that conversation. But I did not get to finish the actual conversation for it, so I'm going to quickly run through it so I can have enough to make sure I still have enough time to get through what I want to get through today as well. But I started off with the statement that, are you listening to understand or listening to respond? Again, I'm just want to take a few minutes to talk about it. Okay, something that connects directly to everything that we discussed last week. Communication. Because you can have two people who genuinely care about each other and still completely misunderstand each other. Why is that? Because sometimes we focus so much on how somebody is saying something instead of that we completely miss what they were trying to say to us. And I think that's something we need to get better at. Sometimes we need to respect the way people communicate, because I'm going to clarify what I mean by that. I'm not saying disrespectful communication should be tolerated in no way, shape, or form. I don't think that's fair to anyone involved, the person dishing it out or the person that's receiving it. I don't think it's fair in any way, shape, or form. Okay. I'm not saying yelling, threats, insults, manipulation, or abuse should be accepted because that's just how somebody communicates. That's just not fair. No. There has to be a boundary there, right? But I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about understanding that not everybody communicates the same way, right? Somebody might need to talk about something immediately, and another person might need an hour to process their emotions before they can even have that conversation. One person might be extremely direct, and another person might need to explain the entire story before getting to the point, right? One person might communicate better face to face, where they can have that conversation, but another person might communicate better through writing because they can organize their thoughts. That doesn't automatically make one person a better communicator. And sometimes we don't actually have a communication problem, we have a translation problem. We're speaking, but we're not hearing each other. Like I was saying then, everyone always says that communication is the key, but I refuse to believe that, because I believe communication is the door. That it's the door. Comprehension is the key you need to unlock that door. Because if we're communicating but don't comprehend what each other is saying, how could I ever open up to let you in? How? How? It's more so of, if we're communicating and it's just communicating but nothing is there, we're talking to a brick wall or a door, whatever material it may be made out of. You're just talking to a door. But if I can understand what you're trying to say and you can understand what I'm trying to say, then I feel like at the end of the day, we can comprehend each other better so we can get through that door of communication. That's that key to me, is to unlock it. Now, something that I've learned is that listening isn't waiting for your turn to talk. That's not listening. That's preparing your defense. I know we was in court, right? You're sitting there thinking, okay, when they finish, I'm going to tell them why they're wrong. That's not listening, that's debating. Listening means I'm going to try to understand what you're saying before I decide how I feel about it. I want to process it. And that's hard, especially when you're hurt. We know everyone goes through it, okay? It's tough. It's like walking on needles, especially when you feel misunderstood yourself. Because when you're emotionally activated, I like how that word, emotionally activated, your brain wants to defend you. It instantly goes to, I'm being attacked. I'm being attacked. I'm being attacked. And that's not necessarily the case. It wants you to prove your point, and it wants to protect you. And that's exactly where survival mode can interfere with communication. Because instead of hearing, I'm hurt, you hear, you're a bad person. Instead of hearing, I need more from you, you hear, you're not good enough. Instead of hearing, I don't feel heard, you hear, you're being attacked. And now you're defending yourself against something the other person may not have even said or even thought about, right? And one thing is true, two people can be hurt at the same time. I want to acknowledge that because I know that's very important. Some people probably haven't realized that or tried to understand that, but two people can have completely different experiences, and both people can genuinely feel hurt. That doesn't mean both people are automatically right about every detail. It means their emotions are real to them, and you don't have to agree with somebody's interpretation. I don't think that you're supposed to if you don't really want to. To acknowledge their feelings, you can say, I understand why you feel that way, without saying, you're absolutely right. Those are two different things. Sometimes people think validating somebody means admitting fault. You don't have to admit fault to make validation. You can say, I hear what you're saying. I understand why that hurt you. I didn't intend for you to feel that way. Or let me explain what I meant. That's just communication. You just have to want to be willing to comprehend on a two-way street. Can't be one way, right? When I say it can't be one way, I say stop trying to win the conversation. Obviously, if it was about winning a conversation, anybody that takes a debate class or has been on a debate team is going to be able to win a conversation. I think you don't have to win every conversation. I think it's more about understanding each other. So if you're only looking to win for yourself, that's, and depending on the conversation, you may have to do that. But in most cases, you don't have to win every conversation. Sometimes we're so focused on proving our point that we lose the person we're talking to. What's more important is it being right or being understood? Because I believe that it would be being understood. And sometimes what's more important than both of those is understanding each other. The simple fact of that, I want to understand where you're coming from, and I hope that you understand where I'm coming from. Because if I'm talking to you just to prove that I'm right, I'm not really communicating with you. I'm competing with you. I'm in a competition now. And relationships shouldn't feel like courtrooms. We all know that. And not every disagreement needs a winner and a loser. Sometimes the goal should simply be, let's figure this out. Let's find out what the core issue is and where it's coming from, how we can attack it together and deal with it. You have to just respect the process. And I want to bring this back to respecting communication styles. Like if someone says, I need a little time before I respond, give them that space. If someone says, I need to talk about this now because it's bothering me, don't automatically dismiss them either. There's a middle ground. You can say, I hear you. I'm not ready to have this conversation right now, but I don't want to ignore it. Give me an hour and then we can talk, right? That's communication. That's a boundary without abandonment. That's space without avoidance. And there's a difference because sometimes people say, I need space. And what they really mean is, I'm disappearing so I don't have to deal with this. That's avoidance. But saying, I need some time to process this and I'll come back to this conversation, that's emotional responsibility. Maybe I'm just not there yet to have that conversation and I need to process a little more so I can have a healthy conversation with you. You have to hear the message, not just the delivery, because we know sometimes the delivery may be off. We know that sometimes. But here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes somebody's delivery is terrible, right? But there's still a message underneath it. And sometimes we get so offended by how somebody said something that we never ask why they felt the need to say it. Again, that does not mean we accept disrespect. You can address the delivery and hear the message. You can say, I don't appreciate being spoken to that way, but I do want to understand what you're upset about. That's powerful because now you're setting a boundary without shutting down communication. And that's something I think more people need to practice. I don't think you'll ever be perfect at something like that because you're always going to meet different people. I just think the more practice you have at it, the more you're ready and prepared for if you do run into that kind of person. So the next time somebody tries to communicate with you, before you start preparing your response, just ask yourself, what are they actually trying to tell me? And when you're the person trying to communicate, ask yourself, am I trying to be understood or am I trying to make them feel what I feel? Because there's a difference. Communication isn't about finding the perfect words. It's about creating enough safety for two people to be honest and enough respect for both people to be heard. And sometimes the person in front of you isn't asking you to fix anything. They're not asking you to agree. They're not asking you to take the blame. They're simply asking, can you hear me? And sometimes the most powerful response you can give somebody is, yes, I hear you. Now help me understand. That's where the conversation actually begins. You can always forgive without forgiving, okay? Always can. All right. So that actually leads into what I want to discuss today. So we can kind of run through it. I know it's going to sound simple, but until you've actually been hurt, something that sounds beautiful, until somebody gives you a reason to struggle with it, today we're going to talk about grace, understanding, and forgiveness. I have been seeing a lot of people speak about it, but I think the verbiage and the wordings they have are not correct. I think they kind of use some of these words under certain conditions, and I feel like if you have to put conditions on it, it's not exactly what that what that word is meaning, right? So one of the most important things I want to say right from the beginning is this: forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Okay, it does not mean you have to forget what happened, forget what somebody did, forget the situation. No, forgiveness doesn't mean what happened didn't matter. It doesn't mean what nobody did was okay or what somebody did was okay. It doesn't mean you have to trust them again. And it doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. Okay? And it certainly doesn't mean you have to continue allowing somebody to hurt you at all. Sometimes forgiveness is simply saying, what happened to me is no longer going to control who I become. That's powerful. Because sometimes we think forgiveness is something that we do for the person who hurt us. But sometimes forgiveness is something we do to free ourselves. And today I want to go even deeper, because what happens when you're grieving? What happens when you're trying to forgive somebody, but you're also grieving the relationship you thought you had? What happens when you're grieving somebody who passed away and you're angry with them? What happens when you have regrets? What happens when you wish you had one more conversation, one more hug, one more opportunity to say, I'm sorry, I love you, I forgive you, or even I'm still angry? Okay? Because grief isn't always sadness. Sometimes grief is anger. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's confusion. Sometimes it's relief. Sometimes it's resentment or regret. Sometimes it's all of those at the same time. So today we're going to talk about giving people grace, understanding that people are human, and learning how to forgive without pretending it didn't happen. Okay? And understanding how all of this changes when somebody is grieving, because sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. Crazy to understand that a lot of the weight and stress we put on ourselves, we can just do away with if we just kind of understand that we also human. Okay? We're all human. What does grace actually mean to you? Because to me, what I feel like grace is, we use it all the time. Give me some grace. Have grace for people. Everybody deserves grace. But what does it actually mean? Grace is giving someone compassion, patience, or understanding that they may not have earned perfectly. Okay? It's recognizing you're human. You make mistakes. I make mistakes. You have bad days. I have bad days. You say things you don't mean. Sometimes I say things I don't mean. And sometimes people are fighting battles that we know absolutely nothing about. Nothing. You ever look at somebody and think, why are they acting like that? But maybe they're exhausted. Maybe they're grieving. Maybe they're scared. Just maybe. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're dealing with something they haven't told anybody about. That doesn't mean their behavior shouldn't have consequences, because every action has a reaction, right? But it means we don't always know the entire story. And grace says, I don't know everything you're carrying, so I'm going to be careful about how quickly I judge you. That's grace. But grace also needs boundaries, because grace doesn't mean do whatever you want to me. Grace isn't permission for abuse. Grace isn't allowing somebody to repeatedly violate your boundaries. Okay? You can give somebody grace and still walk away. You can understand somebody and still hold them accountable. You can forgive somebody and still never trust them again. Those things can coexist hand in hand. Everyone want to make that argument and say, oh no, I can't forgive. Listen, forgiveness and grace, you don't have to forget. Nobody told you to forget what happened. But that forgiveness is mostly for you. And that grace you're giving them is for both of y'all. It's for both of you. I'm telling you, I don't know why people think it's one-sided with stuff like that. It gives you patience, understanding, you know. But again, understanding, I don't want you to think I want you to agree because I'm trying to tell you to understand. So let's talk about that for a second, because sometimes we think, if I understand you, I have to agree with you. And no, understanding means I can see how you got there. It doesn't necessarily mean I would have made the same decisions. That's not it at all. Okay. For example, you can understand why somebody became angry without agreeing with how they expressed that anger, right? You can understand, and in that case, it's like, I can see why that makes you angry, yes. But your display of anger, I just wouldn't take that same path. Or you can understand why somebody shut down without agreeing they should have ignored you, right? Right? You can understand why someone made a terrible decision without saying the decision was okay. That's important. It's like I can put myself in your shoes, but in my shoes, I'm not going to make those same decisions. It's just a simple, I'm going to understand you, you understand me, right? Because empathy without accountability, it can become enabling. I've said that plenty of times before, that if you just want to give empathy without holding people accountable, you're just enabling bad behavior. And accountability without empathy can become cruelty. We all don't like to deal with cruelty, right? I believe so. We need both. So think about a parent. Your child does something wrong. You can say, I understand why you are frustrated, and still say, but you cannot hit somebody. That's understanding with accountability. We need to do the same thing with adults. I understand why you're hurt, but you don't get to hurt me because you're hurt. That's a healthy boundary. That's all it is, a simple, healthy boundary. Now, let's get into the big one, forgiveness. Okay? I talk about forgiveness because I used to find it so hard to forgive. I would feel like I'm breaking a bone when I had to forgive somebody for something they did to me. And then I realized I can forgive them and don't forget exactly what it was they did. So to make it a real simple one, so I don't, me, I sometimes go off the charts with them, but just to give you a simple theoretical, if I loan Johnny $40 and Johnny never paid me back the $40, it's been 4 years, he never paid it back to me. And I can forgive Johnny for never paying me back for that $40. I really can. I'll forgive him for it. Hey, it was $40. He couldn't pay it back. I don't know what times we're looking like. It is what it is. I'll let it go. I'll forgive him for it. I don't have to forget that. So if Johnny comes back up to me a few weeks later and says, "Hey, I need to borrow $40," I have the right to say, Johnny, I'm so sorry, but I can't loan you $40. And I don't have a problem explaining. Last time I loaned you $40, you weren't able to pay it back, and unfortunately, this time again, I just don't feel comfortable enough to loan you that same amount of money. Right? I forgave you. We still cool. I'm just not gonna let you borrow that money no more. You showed me you were unreliable with that. I don't have to be mad at you and hate you to remember that I shouldn't loan you money anymore. Forgiveness is like saying, even in a relationship, something simple as your spouse cheating. If you want to forgive and stay, that's a tough one. To forgive and stay is like you have to forgive and understand that you may feel some type of way, but to try to weaponize that again later on down the road is just a little unfair. You have a right to feel the type of way. You have a right to feel how you feel because of what they've done. Correct. But if you've truly forgiven them, you have let that go and you just won't forget it. So if it happens again, hey, I'm all for you getting furious. It happens. You got things that happen. But I think if you truly forgive, you have to accept what happened and not bring that up to weaponize it anymore. On the other side, I believe here, I don't know how it happened, but if you cheat, I just feel like you're just not loyal. So you should just leave. Forgiveness is saying, I forgive you for being unfaithful to me. I just wouldn't commit to you again because you've already proven to me that you can be unfaithful. I don't have to hate you over it. I can forgive you and still be able to walk away and just know to never return. It's not that hard. But a lot of people hate forgiveness because they feel like if I forgive, they're going to win. And forgiveness was for me. It's for you. It's not for them. You can forgive them to let that relief go. Everybody loves talking about forgiveness until they're the one who got hurt. When you get hurt, it's a different type of, ooh, do I really want to forgive? But it's easy to tell somebody just forgive them. It's a lot harder when you're the person who has to live with what happened. That's why I don't believe we should rush people through forgiveness. I'm not saying it's going to be overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. Forgiveness is a process. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you need distance before you can forgive. Sometimes you need therapy. Sometimes you need to understand what happened. Sometimes you need to grieve first. And sometimes you forgive somebody without ever telling them. Because forgiveness doesn't always require a conversation. I tell you, actions speak louder than words. Sometimes it's private. It's real private. Sometimes it's between you and yourself. And here's one of the biggest misconceptions, okay? Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. I keep saying that. It does not mean you have to forget. If somebody burned your hand, learning not to hate them doesn't mean you should put your hand back in the fire. You can forgive the person and remember the lesson. You can say, I don't wish you harm, while also saying, you don't have access to me anymore. That's not bitterness. That's a boundary. Okay? Most things, when you're dealing with another person, another human being, you're going to have boundaries that you have to set. Like you kind of just have all these compartments, right? For different things. Emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, mental boundaries, whatever the case may be. But you're going to have those with people. And you have to kind of like have boundaries with each one. I think if we learn more to not only just stand firm on our boundaries, but also have that ear out to say, you know what, not only am I listening, like you won't cross my boundary, but while you over there on your side, let me hear why you feel like you have the right to cross mine. You know what I mean? Let me see if I can understand where you're coming from at least. So that way I can maybe better explain to you why you cannot cross my boundary. You know, you never know. I'm gonna spend some time on this one here a little bit because people confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. They're not the same. Forgiveness says, I'm releasing this resentment. Reconciliation says, we're rebuilding a relationship. You can do one without doing the other. Some relationships can be repaired, and there's not an issue with that. Some can be, and some just simply cannot. Some people do deserve another chance. Some people have demonstrated that giving them another chance would only reopen the wound that you want to keep closed. And that's okay. You don't have to hate somebody to remove them from your life. That's just maturity. You can genuinely say, I hope you heal. I hope you find peace. I hope you become a better person, and still say, but I'm not coming back. Sometimes the healthiest form of forgiveness is distance. There's nothing wrong with having to be distant with somebody. I think creating a healthy distance between somebody that is not respecting your boundaries is a great thing to do. If that is the only way to keep that away or keep that going or keep your sanity, your mental going, then so be it. So be it. It's not, it's again, distance, not avoidance, right? Not avoidance. So, and then another thing I want to talk about is how grief changes everything. And when people hear grief, they instantly think of a loss of a loved one or someone, right? But there are so many different types of grief that you could be grieving over anything, man. You could be grieving over the fact that your team lost after they went and won 18 games straight. They lost. Now you're grieving her because you're like, no, we were supposed to do a perfect season this year. You know, you can grieve over anything. But let's talk about grief though, you know, just to get more into it. Because this is where grace, understanding, and forgiveness becomes incredibly complicated. When somebody dies, and we'll get that one out the way first, right? The relationship doesn't automatically become perfect. Death doesn't erase complicated feelings. Death, you know, sometimes you love that person deeply and they still hurt you. Sometimes you miss someone and you're angry with them. Sometimes you wish they were still here, right? And you're relieved they're no longer suffering. Sometimes you grieve someone and you're grieving the relationship you wanted with them, not necessarily the relationship you had or you actually have. That's complicated grief. And there is no requirement that says because they're gone, you have to remember everything positively. You are allowed to have complicated memories. You can love someone and still acknowledge their flaws. You can miss someone and still be angry. You can forgive someone and still remember what happened. Grief doesn't always come in clean emotions, okay? Sometimes grief is messy. Sometimes you laugh at a memory and 5 minutes later you're crying. Sometimes a song comes on and suddenly you're back in the moment from 10 years ago. Sometimes you smell somebody's cologne or hear their favorite song and your entire body remembers them, every nerve. That's grief. That's grief. I know a lot of the times we simply brush things off and we go through this whole moment of these are my regrets. This is what I wish I would have done, what I would have said. I have it's been 14 years since I've lost my brother. You know, he was definitely my right hand man. That was my best friend, you know. And losing him was tough. And I had so many questions about it. So many questions and worries and throughout that process there are just so many people that supported me in a way I did not need. Like, as long as I wanted to party, hey, we up for it. But if I really needed to process it, it wasn't that many people around. You know what I mean? There wasn't that many people around. But the people that were, looking back, man, I've always told them I can't thank them enough for just being there. I can't. They had so much patience, so much understanding. They were so helpful, so much grace, like so much guidance. And I just appreciate everybody that went through it with me, because I know sometimes, I'm a workaholic and I'll shut down quick, and I don't want to talk about how I feel. I'm working. I got bills to pay and stuff like that. I don't want to talk about nothing else. So for me, grief was very crazy because I blacked out for years. I don't know things that happened and stories I hear. I just have to go with, because I just worked and I partied. That's it. I worked 2 or 3 jobs, and I would go out on the weekends and forget about life and start back up Monday morning like I had a fresh engine. It worked out well. It worked out well. It worked out well. But one of the hardest parts about grief is the things we wish we had said to people. I think. That's one of the hardest parts. Uh, or unfinished conversations, right? I wish I would have called. I wish I would have apologized. I wish I would have said I loved you. I wish I hadn't been angry. I wish they knew how much they meant to me. Those thoughts can become heavy. They can become really, really heavy. When I lost, so funny thing, not funny, not funny, not funny at all. But when I actually, the day before I lost my brother wasn't affectionate. He didn't say things like "I love you" a lot, or hugs, or none of that. He wasn't really affectionate. But the day before that, he yelled out to me that he loved me. He shouted it in front of everybody, said, "I love you." And when that happened, I was like, man, I love you too. But it just made me love, it comforted me, because even to this day now, losing my brother, I know for a fact he loved me. His actions already showed me. And then that confirmation was like, man, do I wish I would have hugged him after he said it? Most definitely. I do. Um, I also, when his funeral came, I regret that I didn't stand up and say nothing at the funeral. At the candlelight, I had a little poem I wrote, but I just couldn't bring myself to get up at the funeral and say nothing. I was too hurt. So for a while, I regretted that. And I was just so mad at myself and so angry at myself that I never got up to say something at my brother's funeral. And then I realized that, man, you were hurt. You were grieving. It's okay. I had to forgive myself for something that happened 14 years ago. So it was great to be relieved to know, like, man, you could breathe. You can finally breathe from that and realize that, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Like, you were grieving, you were hurt, you were allowed to make mistakes at the time. It's okay. You know, again, those thoughts can become heavy, and guilt can become a part of grief. Like I told you, I was feeling very guilty for it. But I want to remind you of something that I had to remind myself of. You are human. You didn't know that would be the last conversation. You didn't know that would be the last hug. You didn't know that would be the last time you heard their voice. Okay? That's why we have to be careful about punishing ourselves with hindsight. Hindsight has perfect vision. Life doesn't. You made decisions with the information you had at that time. Maybe you would do something differently today, and that's growth, and I'm proud to see it. But don't confuse growth with deserving punishment. Sometimes the forgiveness you need is self forgiveness. You yourself have to let it go. You yourself have to forgive yourself. That's simple, and I know it sounds hard, but the more you try to attempt to do it, the easier it becomes, because you just have to keep reminding yourself, you're human. We all make mistakes. You're human. That's it. Give yourself grace. Let's talk about you. Because we spend so much time talking about forgiving other people that we forget to forgive ourselves, right? Maybe you left too early. Maybe you trusted the wrong person. Maybe you didn't recognize the signs. Maybe you said something you regret. Maybe you weren't the parent you wanted to be. Maybe you weren't the friend you wanted to be. Hell, maybe you weren't there when someone needed you. And now you're carrying that guilt. Listen to me. You are allowed to acknowledge your mistakes without becoming your mistakes. You can say, I was wrong, without saying I'm worthless. You can say, I hurt somebody, without saying, I don't deserve happiness. Accountability says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. Those are not the same thing. And if you're grieving, please understand that guilt can make grief heavier. You don't have to punish yourself forever to prove that you cared. Sometimes healing means finally saying, I wish I had done things differently, but I cannot change yesterday. I can only change what I do with tomorrow. That's it. That's all I can change. That's all I can change. So where does that leave us? Right? What do we do with all of this? Grace, understanding, forgiveness, grief, self-forgiveness. What do we do with all of it? We start by understanding that people are complicated. We're complicated. We make mistakes. We hurt people. We get hurt. Okay? We misunderstand and we react. But we grow, we change, and hopefully we learn. We have to give people grace, but keep your boundaries. Understand people, but don't accuse harmful behavior if you don't see it, right? Also, if you do, don't excuse harmful behavior. Forgive, but don't forget the lesson. Grieve, but don't let guilt convince you that you have to suffer forever. And most importantly, give yourself grace, because you're learning too. I'm learning, you learning, they learning, we all learning. And maybe somebody listening today is carrying anger towards somebody who's no longer here. Maybe you're carrying guilt. Maybe you're holding on to something somebody did to you years ago. Maybe you want to forgive, but you're not ready. That's okay. You don't have to force forgiveness. It shouldn't be forced. It should not be forced. Start with honesty, right? Have that conversation and say, I'm hurt. I'm angry. I miss them. I don't understand. I wish things had been different. Sometimes healing before forgiveness. Sorry, I said that wrong. Sometimes healing begins before forgiveness, right? It begins with telling the truth about how you feel, okay? And eventually, you may reach a place where you can say, it happened, it mattered, it hurt me, but it doesn't get to own the rest of my life. That's forgiveness. Not forgetting, not excusing, not pretending. I'm just releasing the pain, it's just releasing the power the pain has over you. Okay? That's all it is doing, is releasing that. Now, I have a little, before I get to the end of that really quick, I just want to talk about this because we were talking about that, and I want to talk about honesty. You know, some people say your honesty offends me, right? And I just want to say something because I want to talk about the difference between honesty and cruelty, you know, because being honest, it doesn't give us permission to be intentionally hurtful. All right. I do want to start that off saying that. Now let me say something really quick because sometimes people say your honesty offended me, and I understand that, but the truth isn't always comfortable. Okay. Here's the other side of that conversation. I know sometimes we don't like to see that other side of that conversation, but I do want to talk about the other side of that conversation. If my honesty offends you, imagine how exhausting your bullshit is, right? And some people may or may not understand what I mean, but now, before somebody takes it the wrong way, I don't mean it like that. I'm not saying honesty gives you permission to be cruel. You don't have to disrespect somebody just because you're telling the truth, right? There's a difference between being honest and being intentionally hurtful. Sometimes people don't actually hate your delivery. They hate that you said something they don't want to hear, that they didn't want to hear. And that's different. Sometimes the truth isn't offensive because it's mean. It's offensive because it exposes something. It exposes the behavior. It exposes the contradiction. It exposes the excuse. And sometimes, just sometimes, it exposes the part of ourselves we don't want to acknowledge. We live in a world where people will tell you, don't judge me, don't question me, let me do what I want. But the moment somebody holds up a mirror, suddenly they're the problem. And it's like, here's the issue with that. Here's the issue with that. I do know that sometimes some things need to be said in a certain tone and manner and delivered the right way for somebody to try to understand or comprehend what is being said. What I always tell people is, I'm not calling you out on something that you've just done. If I'm coming to you about something and I'm being very respectful about it, I'm calling out a pattern I've seen and that I've recognized. I think a lot of people confuse, being held accountable with rudeness, and I don't think that's true. Because me holding you accountable doesn't mean I'm being rude to you. That's just me saying, hey, this is what you did. This is the reaction you got from it. This is why it happened, right? And again, that doesn't necessarily mean I was the person involved, but you could be mad at me for expressing the situation, and I'm telling you, no, you're in the wrong. But I'm explaining why you could have done things differently. Let me not say you're in the wrong. I'll explain why you could have done things differently to get a better outcome. That's what I will say with that. Okay. I I say the mirror because I've always told people, no, I'm a mirror. So I treat you how you treat me. So what you see is the way you treat me, and you may not like that. But I don't do that right away. I treat you how I want you to be treated, and then I treat you how you treat me. If it's not reciprocated, is that not what I should be doing? I have my boundaries, right? Respect. But again, suddenly you're the problem if you want to hold up the mirror. And I'm not saying you have to accept every criticism somebody gives you. I don't think that's exactly what I want you to get from that. But if multiple people are telling you the same thing, at some point you might want to stop asking, why does everybody keep judging me? And start asking, why does everybody keep noticing the same thing? Okay. It's all right to be self-aware. There's nothing wrong with that. That's where accountability comes in, because growth isn't always comfortable. Sometimes growth sounds like, damn, maybe they right. And that's a hard sentence to say, but it's also a powerful one. So yes, my honesty might offend you, but if you're constantly offended by people pointing out the same behavior, maybe the problem isn't everybody else's honesty. Maybe it's the behavior they're being honest about, right? And sometimes the truth doesn't need an apology, it needs a response. Sometimes I don't think we'll get that, because the goal isn't to be brutally honest, if you ask me. The goal is to be honest enough to grow and mature enough to hear the truth when it's your turn to receive it. I think that's what that would really look like, what real maturity and growth will look like for that. Okay. Um, Again, I want to leave you. I want to leave you with this. I want to leave you with this. Give people, give people grace, because you don't know every battle that they're fighting. Okay. Give people understanding, because everybody doesn't know how to express what they're carrying. They just don't. Give forgiveness when you're ready, because carrying resentment can become its own prison. Okay. And most importantly, give yourself grace, because you're still becoming the person you're supposed to be. You are. I just want y'all to realize that we gonna mess up in the future, just like we did in the past. It may not be as drastic, it may not be as severe, but we're gonna make more mistakes. You know why? Because we only human. The more we go through life, the more we get through it. Life does not have a map to tell you how and when to get through it. Life just be lifing, and we got to deal with it. We got to be lifing with it. That's it. That's all. That's all we can do. You know, man. Just I'm glad I was able to get that out. But I appreciate y'all. I really do appreciate y'all for coming out and listening to me, because I hear y'all talk to me sometimes, and I hear conversations, and I love the input y'all have on things. I love the way y'all think about things, the way y'all understand things, because sometimes I would have never thought about it like that, because I'm all like, that's a weird way of thinking of it. But sometimes it's like, that's a unique way of thinking of it. That's why I don't say weird no more. That's a unique way of thinking of it. Because sometimes the way somebody else thinks is probably a better solution or situation or resolution. So y'all may think I'm crazy, but sometimes I'll be wanting to come on here and just like go off and trip and say things and just be all and like all with the aggressiveness. And then I get these conversations with y'all, and I talk, and I realize, you know what, man, I can come at things in completely different ways just from based off what y'all say. So I do appreciate y'all. I do appreciate y'all for sure, for sure. But until next time, until next week, okay? Protect your peace. Please love your people while they're here. Say what needs to be said. Apologize when you're wrong. Forgive when you're ready. And don't wait until somebody is gone to tell them what they meant to you. I'm Juss Quanni, and this has been Talk is Cheap. I'll see y'all next time. Peace, love, and hair grease. I'll catch y'all next week.